Hey, everybody. Happy Friday. Good morning. It is Kathy Klotz-Guest, and we are here with another episode of the Yes and Brand Show live. 10 a.m. every Friday, Pacific, because, the world revolves around Silicon Valley where I live, so it's always in Pacific time. And some of you know me, keep coming back. I love your questions. I love when you join us. Some of you kind of cycle through because it is Friday morning. You got other stuff going on. You can always watch it later. I'll put links in there. We'll also add a link to our guests' information. I am the author, for some of you who don't know me, of Stop Boring Me. What? Stop Boring Me. Yay. And today we're going to do anything but bore you because we have a guest on that I'm just crazy about. He is funny. He is smart. He makes me laugh, but he just does amazing infographics, his company. And that is Brian Wallace of Now Sourcing. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. So I get to cheat here a little bit. He's a speaker. I met him at South by Southwest last year. He's fantastic. He's an infographic expert. And I'm going to tell you this right now, and I don't say this lightly. Go to nowsourcing.com. You'll see some of the most beautiful infographics you've ever seen. Like there's infographic templates, and then there's Now Sourcing on the other end of the and they're beautiful. They're gorgeous. He is also a Google SMB advisor, and his clients include a ton of people, including Adobe, FedEx, Microsoft. Oh my gosh, the World Bank, everybody. So welcome to the show, Brian.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Appreciate the introduction and great to be here.
Yeah, I'm so glad. I'm so glad you could make it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we talk about visual storytelling, and it's such a broad topic. So how do you, and I'm not asking for like the Wikipedia definition, but like you're an expert, you make gorgeous infographics. Like really quickly, like how do you define that? What is it for people? What makes great visual storytelling?
Sure. So, and it's a great question, and it's a question that I wish more people would ask so they could actually make better stories instead of some of the crap that you and I have seen out there and everybody's had to suffer through where our eyes cannot unsee. And I think that before we get into the visual part of visual storytelling, we have to think about the storytelling, right? Infographics are just the next thing in line of all the other kinds of storytelling through the ages that people have tried to get their messages across. And I think what's just completely lacking from a lot of people when they take that template do-it-yourself approach is they forget that there is a story to be told. Mm-hmm. Technology is not a replacement. Tools are not a replacement for the human mind and the storytelling, right? So like I've got my little iPhone over here and all that kind of stuff. My iPhone isn't going to make me smarter. Basically, all our technology makes us fail and be stupid to other people faster than it was before, right? So that's not a replacement. So I love to really stress to people that they have to have a story. They have to have a narrative in mind that people will find interesting because it's not magic that the infographic is going to save you from yourself. So I would say before anybody gets started with that, think about building a dream home. You wouldn't just go to Home Depot, pick up a couple of guys, get a bunch of random hammer nails and ladders, and just build something until the whole thing falls down, right? You would plan it like anything else. But somehow, like when it turns to digital, oh, well, that's just puppy dogs and unicorns with rainbows. So that's fine. We can just do whatever we want. But yeah, it's an actual campaign. We put a lot of work into the kind of stuff that we do. So it amazes me how little people think about the story.
Well, it's so true. And I love that you say that because I spoke at a conference that was all around visual storytelling last year. And that was the thing. It was like, well, let's back up and let's have this, because the more important thing I think in that phrase is storytelling. Without the story, you don't have anything. And so it's amazing how much branding and emphasis we put on branding, and logos are great. Logos are all beautiful and everything, but your brand is your story, not your logo. And it's amazing how many people will put so much emphasis on colors and this and that, and that's all beautiful and wonderful. But I don't know what the hell they're talking about, and they have no story to save their life.
You and me both. Yeah, a lot of times we have to just save people from themselves, where they just basically want to make like a glorified one sheet. It's like, we can take your money and do this, but do people still do one sheets? Last time I checked, it's like 2017 on my watch, and no. So I don't know what people are thinking. A lot of times it's like, it's almost like a safety thing, right? It's like, it's better in some people's minds to just be like mediocre and crappy than to actually think and try to push the curve, move the needle, insert it in here. Yep.
Yeah. Well, if they're working on their one sheets, they're probably working on their Yellow Pages ads too. So they're probably You're like a little bit of a time machine. Go back in time.
Oh man, those are the worst.
No, those are the worst. Well, infographics are such a beautiful form of visual storytelling, and it seems to me. So I'm just going to lay out my premise. Very few people do them well, and I think a lot of the things that I see, I call them infographics because they're they're densely populated with data. You can't read them. You lose the story with so much information. And I think what I see is, and infographics became really popular a few years ago. I mean, you know this stuff. And I think everybody then started putting out infographics, but I saw very few that were done really, really well. And so what is, just in your opinion, what's really wrong with the way, or maybe wrong's not the right word, but it kind of is. I mean, what's not working with a lot of the ways that people approach infographics today?
Well, people are lazy and they're looking for shortcuts with pretty much, this is not specific to infographics, right? So if people have a way to do something faster or cheaper, they're going to try it. So a lot of people that end up hiring us usually just say, what do we need you for? We have a whole in-house staff, we have designers, we have journalists, blah, blah, blah. We could just do it. And then they try it. And it takes them like 6 months, and then, it doesn't even go live or whatever. So they find their way back over and they're like, wow, okay, yeah, you're right. It looks like there is a whole process. And we say to them, it's like, if you build toaster ovens or jet engines or whatever it is you do, why don't you just stick to your knitting? Like, why all of a sudden are you a marketing company? Now, granted, I will say that most companies, if you want to be relevant in today's world, you basically should be a media company, but at the same time, you should be cognizant of what your strengths and weaknesses are. If you're all about the product and you're advancing the curve and making a difference in the universe for what you're doing, you don't need to do all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. No question. And it's pick your stuff, but an infographic has legs. I mean, you and I have talked about this offline, and welcome to people that are joining us or as they cycle through. We're talking to Brian Wallace today of Now Sourcing. It just seems to me that infographics becomes this thing that the media always pushes. It's the rage, it's the latest thing, so we got to have infographics. And I think what ends up happening with those kinds of things, much like a lot of social media stuff, is that people have not stepped back and asked themselves why they need it. And there's a lot of things that an infographic can do well. Right. Maybe an infographic isn't the right vehicle for what they're actually trying to do. Mm-hmm. And you kind of have to, again, like anything else in marketing, this is sort of a it always comes back to what are you trying to do? What are your goals? And
right.
Why might somebody... how do you know when a story is right for an infographic, and what makes something really a great fit to be represented in an infographic? Maybe we can start there.
Sure. Great question. And a lot of times it's pretty funny, Kathy. We will actually come up with the stories for our clients. So sometimes the client will say, hey, we do XYZ, we're trying to reach ABC. Great. But that doesn't really help us necessarily in terms of what the story should be about. It's like, okay, right. Now we know who you are and who you're trying to reach. So usually once we're armed with that information, we will actually take a stab at coming up with what the narrative should be, what the story should be. And to your point as to what these things are for, what we should use them for, there's really a number of different things. So I already said that whole product one sheet kind of thing. So I feel like there's a lot of sales and marketing teams that should have something like an infographic or an infographic itself, but they're stuck with these horrible PowerPoint presentations and just these things that are too salesy, too pushy, and people don't make decisions on a bunch of tech specs. They make decisions on what other people that they know and trust are doing and who they're going with, and a couple other tangential things. And it's kind of amazing how we make decisions, right? Like, why do we make decisions based on how many 5 stars something has on Amazon? What if the company just went on Fiverr and just paid 5,000 people to do it? So we're trusting total like random strangers that might have been paid to make our decisions for us, whatever. So that's crazy. So I feel like it can be a wonderful sales and marketing tool. Once somebody's in the door, they're actually making a presentation. It's something that can easily fit on an iPad. You can chop it up as PowerPoint. So it's something that's very relatable, very human, and it just tells a great, vivid, wonderful, feature-rich visual story. Also, a lot of people don't know how to explain who they are, what they do, what their entire market is, right? So if you're doing like cybersecurity or something really difficult to understand and get your hands around, and there's all this tech jargon, all these acronyms to make you feel stupid. Well, if you have something that explains it really well, that can cater to people that have no idea what you're talking about, but at the same time still keeps the core constituency and the experts happy, because if you're truly an expert, you should be able to explain something easily. People struggle with that. And then I'd say the third leg of what really can help define your audience here is, well, something that we're really good at is just getting in the press all the time, right? So companies that are obscure, maybe they're starting out, maybe they just do something that they never thought they would get national press about. Well, if we have a good angle for something, well, we're going to walk that into press, and we've got a lot of relationships, and we know what the press is looking for. We know what mass media is looking for. We know what their audience likes. We know what kinds of styles of things and data points. We just know all of the secret sauce, if you will, that helps kind of nurture some of those relationships and get some things going. I don't mean that we pay bloggers to post stuff so everybody gets destroyed by Google or whatever. I mean, actually, we know these people and we have relationships with these people. I mean, we've been doing this almost a decade now. So I'd like to think we've learned a few tricks of the trade by now. So I think it really can help people in a lot of ways that they don't usually see that work together, right? So most people don't connect media, PR, outreach, SEO, but also presentations and sales pitches and things like that. So I think it really can be just so useful across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. Welcome, everybody. And if you've got questions, let us know you're here. Some people might have a question, so feel free to ask a question if you've got it. Go ahead, let us know. Just type it on in there. But if you've got it, if not, you just want to watch. We don't judge. Some people just like to watch. We're okay with it. I'm here with Brian Wallace. I'm Kathy Klotz-Guest, and we were chatting about kind of the backstory to infographics. And one of the things that we've already hit on just a little bit is you've got to have a story. I mean, really the essence of a good infographic is a story, and it's not a replacement for the one sheet. What do people need to think about? And I know you can help people with their story. And if somebody's doing it themselves, maybe they don't have a big budget. It seems to me there's a lot of legwork that has to go into, because I've done infographics, not on a totally different level than you've done. You really need to think about your infographic information really differently. So it is not the place where you're talking all about your product. It is not the place where you're talking about your branding. It is not the place. You're solving a problem. And it seems to me, this is my own sort of learning and observation, is that the best way for an infographic to really share that story is, well, what's the issue? What's the problem in the market? Who do you serve and what problem do you solve? And there's got to be a backstory to why you even exist in the world. So why would you make an infographic? And it's not a replacement for all the other things that you should do as a branding exercise, but it's really meant to give sort of the richer backstory. What are those stories that make infographics successful?
Sure, and it's a wonderful question. Like we said in the beginning, I think if more people put more thought into the front end of it, they would see so much better a return, right? So, I mean, take the thing that's behind us over here, and I can shoot links to all this later. So if you can't see that, there you go. So at the top of that says the psychology of color. So this is a really interesting piece, and that's why I usually have it in the background of stuff that I do. This was for a painting company. Now, paint is super boring, right? You've got a painted wall behind you. There's a phrase like watching paint dry. It's not really a very exciting activity, right? So what the heck is the story of paint? The story of paint sucks, right? I mean, it's not fun. It's not exciting. It's just all right, I guess I gotta paint my house. Oh, I gotta move, right? So who needs that? So a painting company came to us and they're like, hey, you're really good at this. What can you do for us? And we're like, I don't know. I guess we could try to figure out something that's cool. So I feel like if you think about when you're sitting down at the internet, there's distinct moments during the day that most people have to think about stuff, to try to make their life better, to escape their world that they think is terrible, whatever. I mean, some of it could be life hacks, productivity, escapism, internet addiction, whatever. There's all these little moments that we have during the day, whether that's when we wake up, morning coffee, maybe you're commuting to work by public transportation. So on your ride in, you might be looking at your phone on the public transport, right? And then you have let's say 11 o'clock in the morning, you're like, I need to take a break before lunch. And you go check out the internet. Then you might look at the internet during your lunch hour. you're bored and need inspiration before it's 5 o'clock, on the way home, at night, when you're going to bed. So you have all these distinct moments in time.
Yeah.
And there's so much information out there in the world, way too much information for us to even try to figure out how to prioritize and sort through the digital landfill in our brains, right? It's total overload. So when we see pretty pictures in the 2.7 seconds to actually get your attention, people are going to go, ooh, look, that one's pretty. And if it can give me, it's not going to give you like expert level proficiency. So in the case here, you're not going to be like a color consultant, interior decorator, designer overnight. But if it can give you the hope of learning a little bit about an industry that in a 2, 3, 4 minute read, you're going to say, wow, I never really thought about that people paint their office blue because it enhances productivity. Now, you might say it's pseudoscience, and we can argue for an hour about that. But the reality is, people don't think, and they don't know how to make choices, like we said before, with like the 5-star ratings and all that. So if that's not your skill set, and you could quickly learn from an infographic, that's amazing. You've helped change somebody's life, right? So we've had people say to this client, they said, not only are we going to buy from you, but we're going to paint our office blue and we're going to paint our kitchen yellow. And it's like, what? Like, you're learning all of this stuff on the fly. And that's really a tremendous kind of tactic. Yeah. And it just continues to catch on fire like that.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love it. I'm looking at the infographic there behind you, and I really love that. I think that's really what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be just a quick hit of something I didn't know. Oh, wow, I didn't know that. I learned something. I'm looking at beautiful pictures. It tells me why it matters, why paint matters. Not your company, but why the issue itself matters. Right. And if I can learn something really great, there's the backstory. So it's getting people to understand that there's a bigger story to why your company even exists in the world. And if you can find that bigger, really interesting human story, not about your products and services, because nobody wants to write a check.
Nobody cares.
Nobody cares. Nobody cares. Nobody cares about my business. Nobody cares about your business. They want something else. If you can find that story, I think that's really what we're talking about. And it's no different from a piece of content that I would create in writing or video. Really, it's got to be that sort of human interest angle.
Right.
And do you see companies moving towards that, or are they still kind of looking at infographics as just another way to repurpose something that they already have, or are they making it a unique story?
That's a great question. So I'd say it's a mixed bag. So in the early days, like I said, we've been doing this since the late 2000s. People would have to kind of borrow their budget from over here because they didn't even know what an infographic was. So they'd be like, random marketing dollars. We're tired of getting screwed on stuff that doesn't do anything. We'll kick out the yellow pages and we'll try this crazy thing because you seem like you know something. So nowadays, people actually have it as like a budgeted line item.
Oh, wow,
so
they do?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Not everybody. Like there's still plenty of places we deal with where they're still doing their first one ever, or maybe one of their first couple. But it's become something that's much more mature in the market than it was from years ago. So it's something that many more people have heard of. There's still plenty of people that don't know what it is, haven't heard of it, but comparatively have heard of social media or blogging or SEO or email newsletters, right? So it's totally in its infancy compared to some of that other stuff, but it's definitely reached stride. So yeah, I mean, some people don't get it. I feel like some people hire us and they still like are still in the middle of like understanding. And it's like, oh, it totally does all that. Oh, okay. So sometimes if you just see examples of other things that have worked, until you kind of internalize it and make it part of you and your brand, you don't get it. But it's so, thanks, Chris. So it's just so funny that, a lot of people, it's not about you. It's not about your brand name, right? It's you telling a better story, right, than the other guy. Mm-hmm. Like, Kathy, what kind of milk do you buy at the store? This is relevant. I'm not being nosy.
Yeah. I think we buy fat-free, and it's just, I think it's organic fat-free milk, and that's as much as I know, because that's how much mind share I give the purchase. I get it,
but you probably couldn't even do you even know the brand name of the milk?
I think it varies. I think what we have in our fridge is whatever the Safeway house brand is, whatever that is, yeah.
So you might shop on price and the style of milk, and you're probably making sure it's not $50, but it's like a couple bucks or under $2, whatever, right? And you're checking the expiration date. That's pretty much it. What I'm getting at is milk like many other things, is a commodity.
Right.
So this paint guy is a commodity. What you and I do is a commodity, right? There's a million people that are doing podcasts right now. Of course, they're not as good as you, but you know what I'm saying, right?
This is true.
There's all of these people that are just copying each other, just kind of all doing the same thing. And it's so uninteresting. And if you are not good enough to just be known, right? So like when somebody out there is just like, you know, if a bunch of people are talking and we were across the room, it's like, hey, that guy, like, what's he known for, right? And people would probably say something like, he makes awesome stories and infographics and knows a lot of people and that kind of thing. And they would say that you're great at, like, you know, humanizing content and doing improv and looking at the way to speak and actually do marketing in a different way than a lot of people with fancy suits or, you know, just write books all day do, right? So we all have to be known for something, and that's what people miss. They just put themselves out there, and oh, it has to be all about me. Put my name on it, put my logo, make the logo bigger, and put it all over the place. But they miss the point. They miss the point that people want to make their own decisions and be entertained. Right? And there are definitely brands that get that, right? Like Red Bull is a media company, right? Out in your neck of the woods, everybody's drinking Hint water, right? Because that's like the hot thing, and they're doing a great job marketing. Halo Top, have you ever tried that? The ice cream?
No.
It's kind of, it's sweet. Pun intended. So, but it's good because it's like, it's not so sugary and stuff, and it's super expensive, but then at the end of the day, they just do really cool marketing. It's nice packaging. So certain brands just have a nice flair and style that they just get it. They know their market. They know what they're trying to do, and they're not just being all about them. They're just going along with the flow of what people like to talk about, and then they're just baked into conversations.
And those are big brands, and you know, they're great and they're instructive because I think they have more money, obviously, to invest in these kinds of things, and they should do a great job. And so for folks that might be watching, and we have a lot of entrepreneurs that watch these kinds of things, maybe they're looking at a different budget. So it's a different mindset. Still can benefit from infographics, no question. Because I believe if you've got a great story, then infographics is a great way. It's a great way to cut through all that clutter and get some traction. So what would you say to folks that are maybe entrepreneurs, smaller budget, thinking maybe it's cost prohibitive? Where can they get started? How do they start thinking about something like infographics as an investment?
Right. So I would say, first off, it's probably not as much money as people think. And by the time you do the math, comparatively to spending a bunch on PPC or SEO or press releases or whatever you're going to find your money on, this is something that we can make massive effect on a single project. Like that piece that we're looking at is 5.5 years old. Right. The fact that we're talking about a piece that we created and was live, half a decade ago is incredible, right? People see this, talk about it on social still pretty much every day of the week. People continue to pick it up in the media, and it just has a life of its own, right? I mean, I think it went like front page in a category on Reddit several months ago. And it's like, you shouldn't be able to get that kind of mileage on stuff like that. So I would say for the entrepreneurs, I actually love working with entrepreneurs because sometimes we're working with larger companies. There's a lot of bureaucracy and red tape and, decisions by committee. And when you do things like that, you usually will compromise a bit on the creative quality that makes this kind of media special. I find that we are able to help a lot of entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are nuts, right? Like we're 2 clicks away from being totally crazy. I count myself in that next. And it's like,
that's pretty generous. I'm already there.
You're already there. Okay. Depends. I think it depends on the day. But there was a great piece in Inc. magazine, Inc. like Incorporated, not Tattoos, where it talks about the psychological price of entrepreneurship. And the writer talks about how being an entrepreneur is like riding a lion. So to everybody else on the outside, it's like, wow, look at that guy. He's totally riding a lion. But you and I were on top of the lion. It's like, we're just in a field. Like, oh my gosh, I'm on a lion. How did I get here? How am I not going to die?
At any point in time, I'm going to die.
Right. Yeah. So every day, like you can go from like totally like riding high to just your life totally sucks. And it's day by day or hour by hour. It's a very difficult place to be in. Right. So that's the bad. But the good with entrepreneurs, they're risk takers. They're willing to kind of go above and beyond. And I find that a lot of our successes are with people like that just say, you know what, you guys are good at this. That's why we're hiring you. Go with the crazy idea that you think is going to do really well, right? So yeah, I would definitely encourage entrepreneurs to go with this because that's what they need. They need to get noticed now, right? A lot of businesses fail by year 1 or 2 or 5 or 7 because they don't get their word out there, right? They just die because they don't get enough cash. They're not known. So they might be great at what they do, but if people don't know to hire them, they're dead, right? They have to get the word out there. And this world is too crowded with crap. There's ads everywhere. And how are you going to stand out? So you don't have millions of dollars to go take on some of these brands. So you have to do more of a guerrilla effect.
Well, this is why I don't think marketers should go to heaven, because that will screw the place up like that.
There's going to be ads everywhere.
Ads everywhere. It's like, stop it.
Do you want to do the freemium version of heaven? I don't know.
Exactly. Exactly. Heaven brought to you by these brands. Oh, stop it. Well, no, I mean, that's why on a whole other role, it's like I'm so worried about my Facebook messaging and Messenger getting co-opted by brands. But no, you're right. Man. But the beauty about an infographic, it is crazy. But I think back to your point, I think the nice part about that, I definitely have seen firsthand is that I think I told Brian this a while ago, is that I, in another life, was a Gartner analyst. Yes, I was. I ran a service. Amazing. I'm a nerd. I'm a total nerd. Yes, I'm a nerd who was in tech marketing and also 20 years in comedy. And what I found is that our infographics, our visuals, were probably cited more than anything else by the press, because the infographics, those become so sellable for the press. The press relies on them, and they're a great hit, uniquely a unique thing. And if say Wall Street Journal ran your infographic and got an exclusive head start before anybody else got it, that's something unique to them. It's something that's a quick hit. Their readers can consume it very quickly. And visuals really are, to Brian's point, I do know from experience, the press loves them. So if you've got something that explains a market that's been researched, and there's research and science behind that infographic, for example, the science of color, maybe something like that. That kind of stuff makes a great story. It makes a great consumable for the press, and they love that kind of stuff. This is true.
Right.
But if somebody start thinking of starting out as an entrepreneur, again, smaller budget, are there things that they can do to get ready? All right, they're thinking about maybe doing an infographic. What are the kinds of things that they should be thinking about? So when they finally, whether it's you or somebody, and what should they sort of be prepped for, so that by the time they sit down to get that infographic underway, they've already got a sense of what they need to think about?
Right. Mindset shift is the biggest thing. So a lot of entrepreneurs have a habit of getting to be egomaniacs, and they need to kind of put that in check a little bit. So again, not about them, not about their name and lights. Ultimately, they should be serving their customer, right? So like a lot of times, if you all go on my website, there's a little live chat thing. And once in a while, I'll reach out to people, and they'll be like, wow, is this the CEO? I'll be like, yeah. They're like, how the heck could this? How could this be the CEO? Don't you have better things to do? I'm like, well, who the heck would you rather have talk to you? How about the person with like encyclopedic knowledge of this industry? And they're like, oh, wow, good point. So people are used to like just terrible customer service, and they're used to pumping out crappy content because it's just easy. It's like, it's easier to just put it out there without thinking. So I think the mindset of bothering to think about the quality, thinking about the steps, thinking about even what you're trying to shoot for here, right? So if you're going to say, hey, I just want to get a bunch of radio interviews or be on podcasts or be in print, I don't know, maybe you just want to be in newspapers. Maybe you want to only be in local press. Maybe you want nationwide things. Maybe you're really interested in what people in Australia have to say. So I don't even know how to help a company until I at least have some idea what their goals are. And not just goals for the infographic, but they should have, hopefully, if you're a company and you're trying to do something, you should have overall goals. What kinds of territories are you trying to get into? What kinds of keywords are you trying to rank for? So it's almost like a weird hybrid of the worlds of like PR on one side and SEO on the other. And we kind of sit right in the middle of that, which is like admittedly a pretty weird spot. But you can appreciate that as you've kind of ridden both sides of things in your career. So I think when you can use both sides of your brain, it's ultimately super helpful. So whether we're thinking about that, obviously we're thinking about that, but the more companies can think about that before taking on a project like this, the better.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you guys do great infographics, I've already said, but outside of your infographics, because they are beautiful. I have lusted after a few of these infographics. I'm just going to say they're gorgeous. Who's out there kicking it? Like, what's a brand that people can look at that you go, you know what? We don't work with them, but they do some really beautiful visual stuff. Who can people look at as an example of a great infographic kind of strategy?
Sure. So, I mean, I think a lot of people would point to New York Times and Wall Street Journal. There's a number of publications out there that have just entire teams of data visualization people, right? So it's just departments of people that work on news, that work on story, that work on the data viz and infographic side. I know Bloomberg has a whole department. So there's a lot of places like that I think are very impressive. I think that a lot of the stuff, if you look at like Nate Silver's 538, I think happens to be quite interesting, where you can manipulate data points. I love that kind of stuff. I forget who did it, but there was like, drawing a blank. It was a basketball piece where somebody I'm going to sound stupid now, but I'm going to keep going with it anyway, because I think it's just really interesting, where it was like, it showed where every shot the basketball player took over his entire career, like where he was on the floor. So I think if you just have a visual, right? Exactly. Like if you just have like a visual mindset, I think there's just so many things that translate really well into stories like that. Right. So I think those are a lot of very cool ways to do it. And I think being part of a news agency is especially amazing, right? Because they're getting the inside scoop, they're getting breaking news and all of that, and they can apply it in such a cool and visual and timely way. I think it really makes for a good story. So I love seeing stuff like that.
People like data represented visually, and they love interactive too. I think, I mean, the one level up from, I think, the beautiful infographics is this, the interactive data visualization you just mentioned that we're seeing. I think NASA's done some really interesting things with climate change, and you can kind of see where around the globe things are happening faster. In fact, there was just a huge piece of ice that broke off of Antarctica. I don't know if you heard it.
I saw that.
Yes. And it's phenomenal. And they'll show you, I mean, NASA's incredible with the amount of data they have, but the way that they visually represented it in such an interactive way that you can actually go around the world and see where these things are happening. I think that's such a way to interact with data today that we haven't had before. And I think it changes the way people think about the importance of data. And that's the story. They can actually experience the story. Are you guys experimenting with interactivity and any other things that you're doing? And is that growing? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The internet's expanding in so many different ways, but at the same time, everything still kind of sucks. So I would say, compared to where things should be within the next few years, I mean, like right now you're sitting in front of a laptop, right?
Yeah.
I'm in front of a laptop, and our internet speeds aren't that great. So we can't do fancier stuff than we should be able to do. Yet we also probably carry around a phone, maybe a tablet, maybe something on our wrist. So we have all these stupid devices. Pretty soon we're going to have a convergence of devices. So there's a field called HCI, Human Computer Interaction Interface, whatever it is, where it's basically like where neuroscientists get together with like philosopher people and ergonomic people, and it's just like such a multidisciplinary thing. So right now, like the neuroscientists are starting to get involved. So we're having like all these discussions with like augmented and virtual reality people, because eventually, instead of having like a big goofy thing that looks dumb, we're going to basically have like contacts or eyeglasses or just a piece of glass, and we're not going to need like a typewriter and a TV screen, a laptop anymore, because we're going to be able to interact with the world around us. So when you talk about multimedia, and the internet's getting faster, a lot more places are getting fiber-based internet and all that kind of stuff. So when you think about the pipe of the internet expanding and the way that we actually interact with content and on the internet and communication like we're doing, it's going to be amazing. So yeah, we do interactive. I would say that we don't do as much interactive as we probably should, because it's much more expensive. It takes a lot longer. You have to code, you have to QA all of it, and people don't like doing all that. And a lot of times journalists are just like, just give us the damn image. Like, what do we need all this fancy stuff moving around? So if you could tell a good story like that, a lot of times people are like, well, why would I spend multiple times more for nothing? And I'm like, well, yeah, good point. So until everything's better, like remember the first .com revolution? Do you know why most, I was in there too. Remember why most of that stuff failed? It's because of the internet. So in like 1999 or 2000, only 7% of the United States had broadband. And when I say broadband, I don't mean like what you and I are broadcasting on right now. I mean like almost like a T1 speed, like a meg and a half bit. That's it. You can't even stream Netflix on that, John. Yeah. so you couldn't do anything fancy. Like we wouldn't be able to have like something like this that long ago, right? So we're only just getting there. We haven't arrived in much more of a fully realized and socially aware kind of internet. So we've been messing with that. About a year and a half ago, we did like a crosshairs between infographics meeting virtual reality. So I think all that stuff, I think all that stuff's coming, but I think the tech is a little too goofy and too many wires and not wireless. And it's problematic. Like, how do you stream all that stuff through the internet? A lot of it's just, on-site installations and stuff, and it's not perfect and it doesn't work that great. You have to have supercomputers running it basically. So we're getting there. Yeah. Good.
Well, no, you hit on something really important, and I think you're absolutely right. And there are companies working on that sort of V6 and above internet, because you're right. I mean, if we're all using Wi-Fi. I mean, I know from this, like if I'm using Be Live on Wi-Fi, I'm screwed. I mean, it's just going to go up and down because it's variable bit rate and it's going to drop. So if I'm not on an Ethernet, so let alone like. If we're talking about these advanced technologies, we need to have an upgrade in basically the backbone of the internet, the speeds of the internet, and how we're doing packets. But I think it's very interesting because I do think you're right. One of the things I'm excited about is I think for visual storytelling, this collision is happening. It's happening. And soon as the technology supports it, I think you are going to see more AR and more maybe infographic technologies, all these things embedded, and you're going to see just a huge convergence, and we're all going to be accessing it from this, or whatever replaces this. And I think it's fascinating.
Absolutely. Speaking of that one, I mean, Apple in their latest thing was saying, all the new iMacs are going to have like VR native support and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And to Ben's point, he's absolutely right. I mean, our internet capability in America totally sucks. I mean, there's hotter pockets. Like you're in the Valley, right? So like I would imagine your internet speed's pretty good. We're out in the Midwest where it's catching up, but it's still pretty lacking. I mean, if you look at, I think South Korea basically leads the world in average internet speed, and it's laughable what most people in America consider broadband. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, and they didn't have a lot of the landline kind of infrastructure.
That's
they
true.
just leapfrogged to whatever Wi-Fi or whatever sort of satellite or whatever they had because they didn't have this kind of big infrastructure to overcome. But you're right. I think it is exciting, and I think to Ben's point, we're gonna get there, and I think there's going to come a day where we're all going to be using this stuff. So, which brings me to really another question, and without regard to just infographics specifically, when we talk about that larger issue of visual storytelling, what do small businesses need to be thinking about? I think a lot of times when we talk about VR, we forget, because we talk about it at the high level brand experimentation with all the big brands. So the big brands are making the investment. The big brands have the money to throw out a lot of these things. What can smaller entrepreneurs be thinking about now with their website, with the tools they're using, to start thinking about getting ready for these things?
So one of the things that I love to talk about in this particular kind of question set is when you are a small business or you're in a place that isn't, let's say, New York or the Valley or whatever, you have the benefit, you have the gift of being invisible, right? So if you're in like people where I'm at, so I'm sitting in Cincinnati right now. We're in Cincinnati and Louisville, but for most of the country, people consider that flyover country, right? which is a very unpolite way of saying that people are passing through at 30,000 feet and not actually stopping there. And good for them. They can think that all day long. But, not everybody has the camera on for everything that's going on here. There's plenty of stuff going on here. Mm-hmm. So when you're invisible to the world, you just have this alchemy lab where you can test everything and nobody's going to care, right? So if you are a big company or you're in the Valley, every reporter is going to jump on every stupid tweet you do, or if you wrote something on Facebook, or if you commented this way and that, right? So every single move that you make is scrutinized and critiqued, and you don't get a break, right? And you have no private life and all that kind of stuff. But if you are young and scrappy and an entrepreneur and nobody's paying attention to what you're doing, then nobody's paying attention to what you're doing. So you can, go heads down, hone your craft, and get really freaking good and just fail fast all over the place, go 500 miles an hour, and just try everything, right?
Yeah.
And Manuel knows what we're talking about. He's got 3 hands up. Right.
Yeah.
Where's the third hand?
Yeah, Manuel, there you go. Yeah, no, I like that. Let's put that up. That's awesome. I think that's true. I think it's true even if you're a bigger brand. I think the name of the game is experimentation, because a lot of this stuff is new. I think we're in the really kind of golden age of technology and the golden age of experimentation, and now's the time to do it.
Definitely.
I think there is a downside, even if you are a larger brand. I think people worry about the backsplash and obviously having a legacy, but I really think that, like with streaming technologies, I mean, everybody's trying to figure out the model and what works, and the only way to do that is to go do it. Right. So have a plan, but go do it. And I think we're both experimenters. I know Brian likes to tinker and try stuff too. I do too. But that's sort of the improv model of plan, but also then be willing to let go and just kind of get the learning.
Yeah, plan with wiggle room. I think if more people considered your approach and improv instead of just sticking to a script. I mean, if anybody here has read Seth Godin's Linchpin, right? He talks all about being indispensable and that there's no map. If you're sitting here waiting, if you're going to try to blaze forth in an industry for yourself as an entrepreneur with all this global competition and you're like, waiting for the 10 easy steps to go be a billionaire, good luck, dummy. Not going to happen.
Exactly. There's the DIY model. You go to Home Depot and figure that out. Yeah.
Right. Totally.
Yeah. Well, I think that's it. Everyone's looking for the formula, and I think we kind of get caught in that model because, especially when you don't know where to start, you just need to be pointed in the right direction. But I think that's also a beautiful thing today is that there is no one way to do it. So the template, there is no template, because if somebody does the template, then it's their template. And you kind of have to go and forge your own template.
Yeah, and even if you get a template, right? I mean, you still should improvise with it. So, you ever hear the story of the little Italian grandmother with the spaghetti sauce? You know about this?
No.
So the little Italian grandmother. I'm not trying to be prejudiced or whatever. I'm just that's just the little story, right? So you have the little Italian grandmother, and she has the spaghetti sauce. Not to be big stereotype, but that's how the story goes. And one day she's just like, whatever, I want to go sell this to the big spaghetti sauce company, Brand X. So Brand X goes and buys it, and they have their fancy, huge kitchens, and they have the production line, and it tastes like crap. And they're like, what's going on here? We followed the recipe. What happened? Well, what they didn't realize was, as she was testing and doing alchemy like we're doing in the marketing world, she puts her sauce to boil. She tastes it. She's like, oh, it needs a little more oregano. Tastes it again. Needs a little more salt, a little more pepper. And that's not in the recipe, right? Because you're tuning it as you go to fit your audience. Mm-hmm. And people miss that. People miss the sauce all day long, and they wonder what they're doing wrong. They're like, what? We read the ebooks. We watched your video. What's going on? Why doesn't it just magically work? It's because it's creativity. It's not supposed to just be A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
No, it's the organic factor, and that's the fine tuning, and that's the stuff that you cannot. There's no algorithm for that. I mean, I'm in Silicon Valley. Everybody wants the algorithm. I mean, I do a workshop. Everyone wants the perfect algorithm for the perfect story, and I'm like, got news for you. I can give you a template of what a story flow should look like, but guess what? The secret is in how you stitch these things together and how you tell it. Right. So, and that's going to be different every time. And you and I both know that. But we're big advocates of that. We're alchemists. So if you think about just sort of stepping back for people that might listen to this and go, okay, what are 3 things maybe that I could do that, if I need to think about an infographic or should start planning one, and we've talked about a lot of stuff, what are 3 things that any company could do? Maybe some low-hanging fruit stuff to think more visually.
Right. So I would say coming up with a very unique story angle, but not just something that is only going to appeal to 10 people, something that's going to appeal to everybody in the world, but also the people that you want to appeal to. So come up with the perfect idea, try to do some research and narrative on it, and then, not cut corners. Good ideas take time, patience, and work, right? So I think really trying to come up with something that also is visually appealing. Because as much as we've been talking about the story, as much as there's visual storytelling, there's also visual storytelling. right? So if your visual looks like crap, people are going to click away very quickly because most people judge the book by its cover. And if it doesn't look good, they're not going to give it a second pass, for sure.
Yeah. No, and that's a really important point. There's certain things that I do well. There are certain things that Kathy doesn't do. Haircuts and taxes among them. I don't design my own logos for a reason.
Okay, good. That's awesome.
I know when it's above my pay grade, but the story itself, that's my jam, and I swim in that kind of pool. But
Love it.
and I think all those are really, really good points. Are there any just easy kind of templates that you've got maybe at your website that people can learn a little bit more about, infographics? Where do you want to point people, Brian?
Sure. So I would say our site definitely has a lot of different content. It's got a portfolio of all sorts of different ideas. So I think when you are thinking about a piece, it's helpful to just do some internet research, look and see what other people have done. And maybe they've already done your exact thing and you don't want to do it again, right? Or maybe people have done it, but there's another subsection of it. So like we were just actually having an internal conversation today. It's like, wow, are people stealing our ideas? It's like, no, like there's certain ideas that are just good and there's different angles on it, right? So like we have a piece about influencers that's coming out soon. So we just saw something about influencers and it's like, whoa, did they take this? It's like, no, of course not. Like, it's just that lots of people want to talk about influencers. So I would say if you can improve upon an idea that's already done, I think that that's very useful. We don't have templates and stuff like that. It's not really the kind of thing that we do. So like a lot of stuff we do is custom. Like a couple of years ago, we actually had the opportunity to like totally redesign Captain Crunch. So like there's no template on that. Like we had to like do a whole new thing. So but that said, though, there's tons of examples and tons of knowledge because we've been blogging on that forever, right? So just lots of different things to read about on there that I think would be pretty useful.
Yeah. Well, I love that you said that because you said something important that I want to amplify because it's such an important point. And that is just because somebody else maybe has done something similar, there's just certain memes or things that are in the zeitgeist. Everybody's talking about it. Like when Viagra came out, like there wasn't a comic who didn't have a Viagra joke. Like everybody. So it wasn't even a matter of stealing it because who wasn't going to have a Viagra joke?
It's just too easy. Come on.
It's too easy. It's obvious. United Airlines. I mean, who didn't have, a reunited and it feels so ouch joke? I mean, it's just obvious. Some things are obvious. But I love what you say because I think people do sometimes they do the research and they get dissuaded from a topic. But your point is a big one. There's going to be a big topic out there that everyone's talking about influencer marketing. So try to find the unique angle, the approach that no one else is talking about. So it's still a worthwhile thing to do, but figure out the slice that seems to have been dropped and there's a story there. And if you can find your unique take on it, then you've got something, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, if we look at comedy, right? I mean, what are you going to say? Like, oh, people have done jokes before, so I guess I shouldn't show up. Like, what the heck, right? It's ridiculous.
Well, people can be kind of silly too. I'll anecdotally, I'll tell you this. So when the big data, kind of came about as a meme and a phrase, and everybody was like, "Oh, what is big data?" And everybody and their brother had a joke of, "Hey, is that big data in your pants? Or are you just happy to see me?" Like every comic had a version of that. And I remember being at Dreamforce and I saw like 3 different speakers use a version of that. And somebody was like, well, I think, one of the speakers, I think a couple of the other people took my joke. And I said, he goes, what do you think? You're a comic writer. And I said, well, no, look, some things are just, again, so obvious that they call for a joke. They just beg for it. But the beauty is that each one of them had a slightly different take on it. That's the magic, is that you can tell a similar topic joke, but you've got to find your stamp on it. And that's really what an infographic is. Find your stamp, find your way of doing it. So
I'm kind of quietly laughing in the background because I'm remembering years ago we did for a big tech company. I won't mention who just in case they don't like this piece after all, but we did a whole thing on like, it's not the size of your data, it's how you use it. I'll send it to you. And
I want to see it.
If you want to post it.
No, if it's great, we'll post. I'm sure it's going to be great. Well, this is awesome. So where, Brian, do you want to send people or where do you want people to look for more information?
Sure. So obviously, if you check us out on nowsourcing.com, you'll find all sorts of blogs. I talk a lot. I'm on podcasts. We have a wealth of knowledge on pretty much everything you can think about when it comes to infographics and style and design and how to reach audiences and all that kind of stuff. And certainly would invite you all to check out the portfolio for different kinds of things. And then we also obviously are on social quite a bit. So you can see us pretty much everywhere on just at NowSourcing.
Awesome. Awesome. And I'm Kathy Klotz-Guest. You can go to keepitahuman.com. You can find information there about me. You can find information about the book. You can follow me on the Twitter. I don't know why. I just feel like it's funnier when we say "duh." It's just something my grandma would say. So
I like when British people say it.
Yes,
they're like Twitter.
It does. It sounds very, very important and beautiful when they say it.
So important.
We thank them. Everything sound better. But you can follow me on Twitter at Kathy Klotz-Guest, no hyphen. And I'll go ahead and I'll put the links in the broadcast when we finish to Brian's website and also to mine. So with that, everybody, thank you, Brian. This has always been fun. Always fun.
This is great. So happy that we got to do it in front of everybody else this time. It's awesome.
Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. And we usually get more comments after we run this and go off air, but that's okay because Brian and I will go back through the thread and we'll answer your questions if you've got any. So have a wonderful weekend. Thank you, Brian.
Thanks so much, Kathy. Thanks everybody.
Bye.
See ya. Bye now.